Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Technologized, a podcast where we engage leading lights in tech and focus on technology as a force for good. I'm your host, Gretchen Bueermann, and today we're going to be talking about the World Telecommunications ICT Policy Forum, or WTPF, which is a place where policymakers convene to exchange knowledge and discuss ideas related to emerging issues in telecommunications and ICT policy. When it was established in 1994, the WTPF was designed as a platform for global dialogue on emerging policy issues related to ICT and tech policy. We are excited today to have Mr. Rodney Taylor, the chair of the WTPF IEG, that's the informal expert group, which helps to facilitate the conversation at the forum and leads the preparatory process. Mr. Taylor is also the Secretary-General of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Gretchen. It's my pleasure to be here.
So maybe before we get started, you could tell us a little bit about your role as the chair and what that means.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm also a national of Barbados, and in that capacity, the government of Barbados nominated me to chair this group to represent the administration. And my role as chair is to coordinate the inputs that are received and to prepare the report for the Secretary-General that will inform the discussions at the WTPF. So it's to coordinate the work of the vice chairs on each sub-team on the broad overall team of the WTPF, and to ensure that we come to a consensus working with a group of informal experts, as you pointed out. So we're receiving several inputs, and of course, with the excellent support of the ITU Secretariat, we're able to consolidate those inputs into a report that will inform the discussions at the WTPF in 2026.
And I think you mentioned the theme of the WTPF this year, so maybe we can dig into that a little bit. So the theme for this year's WTPF is Accelerating Inclusive, Sustainable, Resilient, and Innovative Digital Future. In this regard, the WTPF will discuss opportunities, challenges, and policies addressing the following: bridging digital divides, particularly as it relates to gender and age, as well as skills and connectivity; green digital transformation, so climate change and environmental sustainability; resilience of telecommunications and ICT technologies; space connectivity; and strengthening ICT-centric innovation ecosystems and entrepreneurship. So, in your view, how do these topics complement each other to address the current global needs and today's technological challenges?
Thank you. Well, they're all related. I think the ITU estimates that there are over 2.5 billion people still globally that are not connected. So as we advance, as the technology advances, as we advance as a society, we have to be conscious of those persons who are not connected, or in some cases don't have the skills to connect. So they may not have the infrastructure available, or they may not have the skills, or the connectivity may not be affordable. So the idea in terms of these themes connecting is that, first of all, we need to ensure that we bridge those connectivity gaps, or we close those connectivity gaps, to ensure that we're developing globally in an equitable way, and that we ensure that no one is left behind. And in that respect, new technologies like LEO satellites and the developments in the satellite space, which is one of the sub-themes, give us the opportunity to connect people in remote areas, for example, that where it is not now feasible to do that. And of course, as we talk about deploying technologies and closing the digital divide, we also have to do so in a sustainable way, so that we don't negatively impact the environment. Of course, we're all aware of the impacts of climate change on the environment, and so that as we roll out these technologies, we ensure that we're doing it sustainably. We're conscious of the energy footprint that is being utilized in the deployment of new data centers and new connectivities initiatives. We also have to be conscious of the skills as well. So when we talk about connectivity gaps or bridging digital divides, it is not just the infrastructure, it's the skills. We also have to be conscious of the differences in terms of connectivity for old and young people, and also women and different disadvantaged groups. So in that sense, they're all connected. resilience of the telecommunications infrastructure as well, going back to climate change and the impacts of devastating hurricanes, where I'm from in the Caribbean, for example. This is a constant threat from hurricanes, for example. And therefore, we have to ensure that we build this infrastructure in a resilient way, that we're not constantly rebuilding. Resiliency in terms of how it is able to withstand climate events, but also resiliency in terms of how it deals with cyber threats and the issues around cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think it's really important the way that you've woven all of these topics together, because they really are very interdependent and interconnected. So, with that, I mean, thinking about the idea that WTPF has been around since 1994, right? Tackling a variety of topics that were relevant then, all the way up through WTPF in 2021. What do you think about the relevance of the topics for today? And why is WTPF and the themes that we're discussing particularly relevant for this moment in time?
Well, we're approaching 2030, and that date signifies the time frame in which United Nations, in terms of its Sustainable Development Goals, set for a lot of these initiatives, so closing connectivity gaps, for example. And therefore, there's a bit of time pressure. We have just, we'll be 4 years from the conference to 2030. And therefore, there is that pressure to close these connectivity gaps and address the Sustainable Development Goals. In addition, since that time, there have been rapid developments in the technological space. We're focusing a lot now on artificial intelligence and how that can help us to address some of these challenges globally. And therefore, the rapid advancements in technology give us new opportunities to address these challenges. Of course, they present challenges on their own, but looking at it from a positive perspective, how can we cooperate globally to ensure that these new technologies help us to close the digital divides, help us to develop and deploy new technologies like space connectivity and new satellites in a sustainable way that doesn't hurt the environment. So this one, I think, I mean, in the technology space, you get rapid changes in the landscape each decade, and I think that it helps us to address some of the challenges. And I think that's what's different about this upcoming WTPF. And so, hence the broad number of sub-themes that are being discussed, and the linkages between them as well.
Yeah, I think a really good point that you've made about the way that it's important for us to consider the timeliness of the technologies as they emerge, and not to fall behind the curve when it comes to discussing them before it's too late, or things are established.
Absolutely. And so the WTPF is a perfect opportunity to bring together experts from the private sector, from government, policymakers, as well as the academic community and other stakeholders, so that we can address these challenges collectively and come up not with policy prescriptions, but with recommendations and opinions on how we as a world can move collectively together to address these challenges.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I would love to stay on that for just a moment, because what are some of the ways that you think WTPF sort of uniquely helps to foster international dialogue? You've mentioned some of the players, but how is it that WTPF specifically brings them together to speak about these issues?
Yes, well, it's being convened under the auspices of the ITU, and the ITU is a well-respected international organization. And what is unique about the WTPF is that it is not confined to one sector within the ITU. But it's not an issue about radio communications or standardization, but it brings all of the sectors together, and it also brings global stakeholders together. So the IEG is open to industry, is open to the private sector, to academia, to governments, and we all come together and discuss in a respectful way to come to try to get to a consensus. And so that is a part of my critical role, is to ensure that everyone's voice is heard and that these critical issues are taken into consideration. So a lot of the opinions are based upon questions that have been formulated based on the challenges that we see. So including the 2.5 billion people who are not connected, and therefore we have to ask questions around how can we close those connectivity gaps using new technologies like satellites, including, of course, using traditional terrestrial fiber. How can we do that in a sustainable way? How can we ensure that there are opportunities for businesses as well, and to create livelihoods in developing countries?
Yeah, I think all of those are incredibly important, and I like the way you've highlighted that it's quite unique that everybody is in the same room discussing these things.
Absolutely.
So I think, as you and I both well know, the preparatory process for WTPF is very intense. It's quite long. We work quite hard with the informal experts group to think very carefully about what the forum itself will look like. So, given all of that, what is the part of WTPF that you are most looking forward to?
Well, I'm looking forward to the successful hosting of the conference in 2026. In a sense, that will bring us to the culmination of the policy development process. You mentioned the time frame, but developing policy, especially at a global scale, is very tedious, is very involved. You have to ensure that you take all of the factors into consideration, from the private sector to government and so on. So it is a long and tedious process, but the process has been very clearly outlined with the support of the ITU Secretariat. And so we have those timelines very clearly defined leading up to the hosting of the conference in 2026. But having reached 2026 and having hosted the conference successfully, we now have to get to work in using these policy recommendations at the national level to ensure that, as I said, they're not regulations to be enforced, but they're policy guidelines that can help us develop and address these challenges in a harmonized way globally.
Yeah, I think a really good point that these opinions, these discussions, they don't just die with the end of the conference. They have to be carried through to other spaces, and they get used quite regularly in other places.
Absolutely. So I'd be, more than pleased as when these opinions are formulated and that the government start to use them, private sector starts to use these opinions to inform their strategic plans, to inform their projects and initiatives, and it will help us indeed in addressing the challenges as we approach 2030.
Well, I think on that note, we'll conclude. I'll give you back some of your day, but thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and thank you for your insights. Thank you all for listening to this special episode of Technologized. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and you can always find more information on our website at www.itu.int. Thank you.